Now, after 4 months plus of long and fiery battles in Parliament, peers voting 5 times to scupper the plan, last night the Lords finally gave in to the will of elected MPs in the Commons, and the government's flagship Rwanda bill will now finally become law when it receives assent from King Charles. Rishi Sunak said this morning that nothing would stand in the way of getting flights off to Rwanda. Famous last words, of course, yesterday. He was saying no ifs, no buts. But he's already lost his spring deadline for getting those flights off the ground. Now we're talking about mid-July. Well, will they ever happen? Will they make a blind bit of difference to the issue? Joining me right now is immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Lovely to have you here in the studio. Thanks for joining us. Tom Slater, also from Spike Online, still here. Ivan, this is the Rwanda safety of Rwanda bill. This is an add-on post this Supreme Court judgment some months ago saying that, well, you could in theory send people to Rwanda for asylum and processing and indeed to, if they granted asylum, to stay in Rwanda. But we don't know whether Rwanda is safe. This is now all dealt with on the legal side of things. Is this going to make a blind bit of difference to the number of people coming over the channel?
Well, there's just simply no evidence that the sending or the threat of sending people to Rwanda is going to be an effective deterrent. There's no evidence for that. So the government are hoping, just as if the same way they're hoping that Rwanda's safe. That decision was not based on any facts. The Supreme Court, having considered the facts, expert evidence, said Rwanda's not safe. So
I don't think they said it was not safe. Didn't they say that they can't be sure that it is safe? But and the Lords...
No. If you read paragraph 149, what the Supreme Court says was this policy is unlawful, quite clear, because Rwanda is not considered a safe country because of the principle of refoulement. That's paragraph 149.
So again, that doesn't say that Rwanda is an unsafe country. It's this principle. Most of us who aren't lawyers only learnt about this term at the time of that Supreme Court judgment, which is the risk that someone could be sent back to the country where they claim they've suffered persecution.
Correct. And the Supreme Court had assurances from Paul Kagame, a dictator, a known imprisoner of political opponents.
That's an awful lot of countries around the world.
Yes,
he's regarded as someone who's done extraordinary reforms in Rwanda.
One of the things he does is lock people up that don't agree with him, and
we've done that here.
And extrajudicial killings. So we take the word of that individual.
Okay.
The Supreme Court didn't.
I think, look, I'm in favour of there being safeguards. And in fact, the last 2 amendments that the peers were holding out on until late last night, just after midnight, when it finally was basically the ping pong ended, were actually an amendment in terms of the getting people who worked with the army in Afghanistan, interpreters and stuff, to safeguard for them, but also to have an independent body that would establish whether Rwanda was safe or was not safe. I didn't, in principle, have any objection to either of those. However, okay, I think there's an element where the government, they've said, do you know what, every single thing, every single reasonable amendment we know is going to be used and exploited by human rights lawyers like your good self, who will end up trying to exploit every single little chink. We know there are going to be legal challenges to this, individual case-by-case challenges. We're told that people are going to be informed and they're likely to be detained in the coming days, but they may not actually be put on a plane for 10 to 12 weeks. There'll be challenges about them being held for that length of time, as you know that as well as I do. There's even a challenge from senior civil servants claiming that they're going to be forced to break international law by the government if they have to go ahead with pushing through this policy. Do you think the legal challenges are ever going to end? Do you think anyone is ever going to end up on a sodding plane, commercial or otherwise, from a British airport to Rwanda?
Look, I think they will end at some point, but what the government's done is oust the jurisdiction of the courts. That's what this bill does. It stops any scrutiny of his decision.
There are still appeals. Because that's what they're going to be allowed to do over the next...
If you read the bill, it disapplies Human Rights Act.
That's not the same as not allowing appeals.
Yes, but they're very limited rights of appeals. So you've got to show that you have a pre-existing... Give you an example. Pre-existing condition, some mental illness that's going to be exacerbated if you get sent to Rwanda. Nobody's going to come within that.
You'd be surprised.
So, the most important, if there are appeals and if there are interim measure applications, the Secretary of State can override them.
Right.
So, although it allows appeal...
The Secretary of State, again, the sovereignty of Parliament and as represented by the government in that case.
Can I just make this one fundamental point? There's a universality of laws when it comes to human rights. Parliament is supreme. I accept that. But when it comes to human rights, to stop people suffering inhumane and degrading treatment, Parliament is not supreme.
No, but this is the thing. This is the difficulty. Human rights
those
laws,
rights.
I think the I'd like to think everybody in this country support the people's right to life, right to fundamental right to freedom from torture, etc., etc. However, when those human rights laws are exploited and frankly mocked in the way they have been, where someone who's a convicted rapist can claim they've got a right to a family life here, they shouldn't be deported, and things like that, even though they've even come to this country illegally. I'm sorry. People being told, or because they've got the right to privacy, or it's been exploited. There isn't a fundamental human right to these things. This is only there if governments are there to uphold it. I just simply don't subscribe to the idea that every random person who can pay a people smuggler and get to this country is automatically then entitled to every single right that a British citizen has in this country. I don't think that is the case.
Can I ask you one question? How many people smugglers has this government convicted?
Well, the people smugglers are on the other side of the channel, so I don't think we end up doing them. No, exactly. It's kind of not our
Instead of focusing on this, they should be focusing on working with the government.
You know what?
Government
OK,
to do that.
Here's the thing. You go. They do go after the gangs. People are arrested in Calais, and there's big, lots of efforts against the organised crime. You take out one of those gangs, do you know what's going to happen the next day? Another gang's going to appear. You have to take out the demand for what they do rather than the supply of the boat. You could get rid of every single dinghy. You'd still have people smuggling.
No, I agree with you, but the way to deal with this is on the other side.
But,
the government wants to deal with it.
Why isn't everyone marching against France saying, why aren't you dealing with this then?
Exactly. Look, the government wants to deal with it when they get here. That's not the answer. We have to horse trade with the French.
Well, we've done that. We're paying them hundreds of millions of pounds to deal with this issue.
We know what they want.
What do they want?
They want some sort of free movement back. That's what they want.
Well, we're not willing to give them that.
You say that, but...
What do you say? What do you mean we say?
Well, look, as I said to you...
I don't want free... We've already got free movement on the channel dinghies.
What I suggest was limited free movement, not free movement everyone.
No, we had a vote on... I'm sorry, the French don't get to decide our laws. That's kind of what the 2016 referendum was all about. And then it was enacted by Parliament. We've done it... This is what people wanted to vote to have, that our Parliament is sovereign. Emmanuel Macron doesn't get to decide who gets to come and live and work in our country.
We cannot solve the problem on our own. We need to engage the
But we don't have to give away the right to decide who lives in our country to Emmanuel Macron or to anyone in Brussels to get them to deal with illegal boats, traffic and people traffickers.
Well, you asked for a solution, and I offered one.
You think that Emmanuel Macron would deal with this issue if we went back to some sort of free movement? Yeah. So, by definition, you're saying Emmanuel Macron is deliberately choosing not to tackle this heinous,
horrible... I'm not talking about Emmanuel Macron.
You talk about France.
No, EU.
He's the president of France.
The EU.
He's very influential.
An EU treaty is what we need.
OK, whether it's Scholz, whether it's Ursula von der Leyen, whether it's Macron, whoever else, they are deliberately choosing not to tackle criminal people traffickers who exploit people. We have 5 people, including a 4-year-old girl, die overnight in the Channel. They're making millions every week. They're putting these people at risk. They're taking their money and exploiting them. And you're saying they're not dealing with it because they want Brexit to be disbanded.
They want something. I think it's that. But look,
do you justify that?
No.
Do you justify that?
We live in an international world. We have to do deals with them.
I think the British people say we don't want to have...
Show me evidence of the French stopping the boats leaving. Show me evidence of that.
They do stop some boats leaving. Yes, we do. We know that because we've seen there is a fall in the number of... Well, there's a rise in the number of boats they are stopping. But this has become such a big industry. The incentives are huge. People want to pay the money and people are willing to make money out of it.
We need a deal with the French. That's the only way
But the French could do that. If the French were able to stop it, they could do that today. So they're choosing not to do it. So why aren't you angry with the French government rather than our government?
Yes, and so my suggestion is find out why and find out what they want. Look, if the tables were turned and we were trying to stop people leaving from France, we'd do it, would we not?
Well, because we're... I'm genuinely...
If we can do it, why
Tom Slater, he's basically saying the French could do this, but they're choosing not to. They're trying to punish us for Brexit, and we should play along.
You can't acquiesce to that, even if that was the case. Also, it's quite clear we've had a series of deals with the French, and it hasn't worked. One thing I would say is that if we're talking about how to deal with the problem of illegal migration, the refugee problem, whatever you want to call it, I would not look to the European Union as a model in which to deal with this. The sort of policies that they've pursued, as far as outsourcing border policy often to the Libyan dictatorship before it fell to a bunch of gangs, the kind of treatment of people that has happened in North Africa, for instance, with EU money to try and stop them reaching the Mediterranean, makes the Rwanda policy look like Butlins by comparison.
Absolutely.
So I think we shouldn't really be taking lectures from Brussels or from France.
Hear on that. We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Time is against us. Simon Sampson, thank you very much. Always great to have you on the show.